Moving on, I don't have a name on this one, Pastor Steve, but this is what it says. How do I talk to my child who believes they are a Christian but is making poor choices, not showing Christian values?
Uh, I would do that the same way. Well, not, I guess not the same way. When I talked with my children about these things, I prayed about opportunities, and when the opportunities came up, I took them. And so every time a kid makes a wrong choice, it's a teaching moment. When my kids were little, the way that I approached them was obviously as a parent who's going to correct them, and so I spanked my kids. But before we got into that, we talked about what their sin was, what they had done, and the reason that they were getting disciplined, and then I would go through and exercise the discipline, and then afterwards I would lead them in, or I would have them pray with me, asking the Lord to forgive them for what they had done, and then they were good. They were golden at that point, and they got to go, and they got totally restored. There's nothing else that went on with that. I didn't do a lot of grounding in the lives of my children, because that's not what God does with us. He doesn't ground us in that sense. And so it started when my kid was little, when my kids were little. When they got older, then I would have more conversations with them about this kind of stuff, and it wasn't just a disciplinary thing. It never was. There was always prayer involved. And so if my kid was doing something wrong to another kid, I would talk to him about, okay, obviously, that's wrong. You're being a jerk. And, what's the deal with you? Why did you go there? And talk about all those kinds of issues. And what's the Lord say about that? And then I would have a conversation there. And then again, we would talk about repentance, and there would be apologies that would be made with the kids and that they were involved with. And I did that in every aspect of correcting my children. And so it was a real natural thing when they got older and started making bad choices, for me to come up and talk to them and say, hey, where's your walk? Where's your walk with the Lord? Where's your head at? Why are you doing these things? What's happening here? Did you think that one through? And all of that kind of stuff. And so I took those opportunities. I have a couple of those things that happen in the lives of my kids that my kids still remember. My daughter off and on will refer to a conversation I had with her in my truck in the gravel parking lot of the fairgrounds when she was in junior high, because she was making stupid choices, and some of those choices had to do with lying to me, and we talked about whether or not you want to really have a relationship with me. What kind of relationship do you want to have with me? What kind of relationship do you want to have with the Lord, and all of that kind of stuff? And I brought her to tears on purpose, to reach her heart. So when I look at trying to reach somebody in a situation like that, I'm not just spouting information at them. What I'm trying to do is get to their heart on a thing like that, and especially if I'm talking about my kids. And so I always prayed about those things. I didn't have a real sit down with my son in an instance like that, because he was built different than my daughter. But when we worked together, we were always talking about the Lord when we worked together. And so sometimes he'd bring up questions, and I would use that as an opportunity to get his head on straight about how he treated people and things like that. If there was any kind of, he had conflicts in high school, and if there was any kind of conflict there and how he was going to handle it between him and another guy, Jesus always came into those things. And so it was kind of a continual thing. I was proactive, is what I'm telling you. I was proactive, taking the opportunities to be able to share with my kids, so that they had a biblical worldview and a biblical set of values when it came to making those choices. And then if they made the wrong choices, then it's a what's up with that. My daughter ended up rebelling, and so we had some pretty straightforward conversations about what was happening in her life and that kind of thing.
So, not to read into this question, but just painting with a broad brush, because I've gotten this a number of times, and it's like you have this attitude. It's almost like a business relationship, and maybe that could be because they got saved later in life and they're trying to patch it together, and there's all those things that go on. But the way you described it, it's like there's a child it's personal,
Right.
and so being able to speak into my child's life. I would never phrase it in the sense of, well, your values aren't matching up with what you're saying, and have it be like a witnessing thing. It's like for a child that I raised, and again, assuming that you raised them in the Lord, and there's all kinds of wiggle room in there, or coming out of all kinds of backgrounds, I should say, got given saved later in life. But it's like there is a personal relationship that's tied to that is not, well, you're not executing Christian values, but it's like, hey, like the things you were saying.
Right, yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Did that work out well for you? And it's more fruitful when you're when you're invested into their life in such a way.
Yeah. So you don't want to make it business like he was talking about. This is, it's not just a, and part of the thing that I saw as I had my kids later on in life, and part of the things, part of the problems that I saw in other people raising their kids is that it wasn't personal.
Right.
It was more of a master-servant type of relationship. And I'm not saying that what you say doesn't go or something, because what I said goes in my house, and so my kids always knew that. And but still, there was a personal. I wanted their heart. I didn't want their obedience. I wanted their heart. And so I think that when you're trying to infuse that in your kid, that's what you have. You have to go out after what you want. And so if all you want is obedience, and that's all you're going to go for. You will not do these things. You will do these things. If I see you doing these things, then these are the consequences, and and that kind of stuff. Even though there needs to be consequences, I'm not saying that there's not. But if the heart's not there, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And so I want kids who are going to do the right thing after they get out of my home, and doing the right thing because they love the Lord, and because they don't want to disappoint Him, and because they're treating Him as the person that He is. And I think that that's another thing that happens with Christians. It just becomes this like almost contract between us and God. And it's not a contract, it's a relationship. And so I don't just do the things that God tells me to because He told me to, or because I'm going to go to hell if I don't, or I'm going to have a bad life. I want to do the things that God tells me to do because I love Him, and He's worth pleasing. And that's what I want. That's what I want to instill in my people. That's what I want to instill in my own life. That's what I want to instill in my family. And so that's how I go after these things.
So I noticed this in my youngest, since our third one, she's 6. She would immediately, she wants to please me. She wants to do the right thing, and she would immediately, without even thinking, I'd go, "Yes, Dad," and even if before I even got the words out of my mouth, it's just like this robotic reaction. "Yes, Dad. Hey, can you go do that?" "Yes, Dad." And I had to, and my wife noticed it first, but it's like, to your point, I'm not looking for obedience. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for the heart. Mm-hmm. And so even though she was doing the right thing, it's like, hey, you're not just doing whatever we say as a response. I want you to connect your heart to this and do it for the right reasons.
Right.
And so, that's a very important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You want them to be the same on the inside as they are on the outside.
Yeah. And that can go in the negative or the positive.